Good morning and welcome to Bright Lights Online, presented by Entergy. I'm Erin Greenwald with the Louisiana Endowment for the Humanities. We have been for the last 2 months running Bright Lights Online programming in honor of our 2020 Humanities awardees. The LEH has been recognizing people who've made outstanding contributions to the humanities since 1985. This is the final program in our 2020 Bright Lights Online series. We started this as a way of recognizing awardees during the current public health crisis, and it's gone so well that we will be bringing it back later this year for a second series featuring our 2021 awardees. Today's program is with Michael P. Smith Memorial Award winner for documentary photography, Charles Lovell, and he'll be in conversation with Gwen Thompkins from Music Inside Out. You will see at the bottom of your screen a little icon that says Q&A with some chat bubbles. If you have a question for the participants at any point during today's program, you can type your question in there. And without further ado, I would love to introduce our guests if they can take themselves off mute and put their cameras on. Please welcome Gwen Thompkins. Gwen is a New Orleans native and music aficionado with an established career in journalism that includes experience as senior editor for NPR's Weekend Edition and as NPR's East Africa correspondent. She's currently the host of WWNO's Music Inside Out and serves as the New Orleans correspondent for NPR's World Cafe. Welcome, Gwen.
Thank you so
Charles,
much.
are you having trouble turning your video on? There he is. All right, here we go. Charles Muir Lovell is the recipient of the 2020 Michael P. Smith Memorial Award for documentary photography, and he's long been passionate about photographing people within their cultures. When he moved to New Orleans in 2008, he began documenting the city's second line parades and social aid and pleasure clubs, capturing and preserving for posterity a unique and vibrant part of Louisiana's rich cultural heritage. Welcome to you both.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Erin. Oh boy. Well, I tell you, I'm very grateful to Erin Greenwald and of course to LEH and thank you to all of you on Zoom webinar and of course Facebook for joining us. This is going to be a lovely conversation. You know, most people seem to think that a sign of wisdom is to distrust what we see. We think of the world as a mirage, you know, that's, you know, some type of great shell game that's been engineered to trick our eyes and obscure the real truth of our existence. And, you know, Americans always love to quote Edgar Allan Poe, who so famously wrote, you know, believe nothing of what you hear and only half of what you see. But they almost always fail to mention that Poe was writing that was a quote that a character in one of his stories said, and that character was insane, spoiler alert, living in an insane asylum. Of course, it's possible to be both crazy and tell the truth, but Poe was actually trying to, in a very comedic way, you know, capture life in this 19th century insane asylum. And speaking of insane asylums, let's go to Charles Lovell. Over the course of his career, he has trained his eyes on the cultural lives of cities around the world, capturing the standard bearers of culture and local traditions who both represent and engage with their neighbors on the streets, eye to eye, toe to toe, and of course in New Orleans, tush to tush. So for more than a decade, he's been on the second line parade routes of New Orleans, and I'm very happy to meet you for the first time, really, face to face. Charles Lovell, thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Gwen. It's an honor to be here, and I want to thank the LEH for their support, and I look forward to our conversation.
Excellent. Now talk to us. What we're gonna do is you can't talk about photography without actually looking at some images. So let's start there. Talk to us a little bit, Charles Lovell, about the before we start our montage. Talk with us a little bit about this first batch of photos that we're going to see. What were you looking for as a photographer on the streets, and when you were following these social aid and pleasure clubs, and what do you think you found?
Well, just to say that when I moved to New Orleans, I actually was a museum director hired by a university. And the first second line that I went to, I was actually in Tremé and just being there wandering around and happened to run into the Black Men of Labor second line when it was kind of at its end. And it was so exciting. And I had my camera and I started following the end of the parade, the one on the left, which was shown at the Historic New Orleans collection recently, is one of the first series that I took of the second lines. And I continue to photograph, but the first ones are the earliest ones when I was actually working as a museum director, and I started out sporadically, but then I got more passionate as the longer I got into it, where now if there were parades, I'd be going to a parade every Sunday and attending all the parades. But at first it was a more sporadic attempt, but I come from a fine arts background. I have an MFA in photography and a BA in photography, but I think I was looking at it as an art form and as with the eye of an artist.
Okay, well then let's take a look at all of at some of these photographs. I mean, they're really amazing, and I want to concentrate on them. So let's look.
And that was one in the lower Ninth Ward during the Katrina anniversary, which was very moving and the crowd was just so into the parade. It was really amazing.
Mm, mm. They're just wonderful. They're just wonderful. Okay. I love the pace of looking at those images. It gives you just enough time to drink in some of the imagery. Now, these, of course, are Charles Lovell's images of New Orleans. This is a New Orleans that we have been missing over this past year because of the coronavirus pandemic. There haven't really been any social aid and pleasure club parades. There's been a long lull in the action. But Charles Lovell, you, as you mentioned, you came to New Orleans. You're born in Chicago. You came to New Orleans. But before then, you lived out west. You lived in Europe. What landed you here, and in particular, what landed you on those particular streets that we just saw?
Well, I think when I moved here, they had just had the Prospect New Orleans, which was the biennial art exhibition they have in New Orleans. And I was so excited to go out and explore all the neighborhoods of New Orleans and get all around the city. And I think that's one thing very exciting about the second lines is you really get to know neighborhoods by participating in the second line. So I've been in all the neighborhoods of Pigeon Town steppers who are way uptown down to the cross the canal steppers who are way downtown, and everywhere in between. But you get to know all the different neighborhoods, the watering holes, it's so lively, the street culture and just the excitement. Uh,
Absolutely. And you had said earlier that you approach this as a fine artist. Now, obviously, you are, I mean, you have been cited as a documentarian, and all. So when I look at these images, and particularly when I first looked at these images, I looked with the eye of a journalist. I saw some, particularly in the first batch that we've just seen, I recognized some of the individuals who were in the shots, and I thought, oh, these people should be named, and there should be dates on everything. And then I started thinking, well, no, this is not my world. This is not a journalistic world in which all of that detail is necessary. What you mean, as a documentarian, and fine artist, how much of what you do is what you consider to be journalism, and how much of it is not journalism at all?
I would say that it actually entails both the journalism and the fine art as a hybrid, perhaps. But it's interesting because when I lived in New Mexico, I organized an exhibition with support from the Rockefeller that had to do with religious practices in Mexico. And I took about 8 trips to Mexico during a 2-year period when I was doing research for this exhibition. And I photographed some of the religious parades that they have in Mexico. And I think some of the things I learned from that documentary photography was passed on when I started going to the second lines, which is it's a similar kind of cultural event that is really important from many standpoints,
Mm-hmm.
but something that is very rich to the New Orleans culture, and goes back to the days when people were parading in Congo Square. I mean, the roots of the second lines go back that far.
Sure, which is, of course, this dates back to the 17th century, actually, and 17th and early 18th centuries, of people who were dancing and making, making sort of cultural ring dances in what's now considered to be Congo Square, right? So you're right. This is sort of an incredible arc that you are following. But what is your responsibility in that? In your work? I mean, what are you hoping to convey to those who look at these photographs? Not only who look at them now, but who look at them 20 years from now or 100 years from now?
Well, I think that I'm trying to capture the spirit of the moment, the spontaneity, the joy that happens, the vigor that happens, the excitement of being part of this human process of a living parade. And I try to, be very respectful of the people that I'm photographing, to show them in the very best light, and editing so that things are of a very positive nature. But I think the capturing some of the excitement of the second line parades, and the people who are so beautiful, and they spend so much time laboring on their costumes and looking at their best, where you have people who are getting alligator shoes from Italy and finely tailored dresses and suits, to where they're looking at their Sunday best and trying to show people in that light.
What's so interesting about visual artists like yourself is that you're trying, in many ways, you are retraining the eyes of the beholders, to see more slowly. That's the best way that I can describe it, in the sense that we tend to, in our daily lives, we glance at things and we think that we've taken in the entire image, when what a fine artist often does is remind us that no, it takes time to drink in an image. And one of the photographs, or a couple of the photographs that appeared in the batch that we just saw, really stand out for me. One is number 7. Aaron Greenwald is helping us with this. Look at this. This is the Big 9 Social Aid and Pleasure Club from 2011. And what's fascinating is the gentleman who is the focus of both of these images. And I love the one on the right, where he seems to have paused, either in his dance or in a moment of repose or thought or prayer. And he's pausing underneath traffic lights, okay, which are all about stopping and starting. And, in the middle of a crowd that has obviously stopped traffic, in the middle of an intersection. It's like the layer of meaning there between the stopping, the point at which we all stop to be in this moment together could not be stronger. Do you do that intentionally?
I think it's being at the right place at the right time. I take a lot of photographs, and they're not all great, but you have to edit them down to the best moments and look for those.
Well, that certainly is one of them. Everything about it just says stop, and in even just in its composition, you have you've got the pole that for for the telephone wires, the telephone wires there, and this little cross, and this man who's the focus of the image, you don't know if he's praying or not, but there's a little cross above him. This, how you say, luck is, in many ways, luck is very intentional. It's not by accident that you had this shot. You saw something. Maybe
Right.
you didn't see what I saw, but you certainly saw something in that moment.
Well, the streets of New Orleans are very colorful, and I have gotten, I think New Orleans is such a vital and wonderful city that being around in all these different neighborhoods, it gives you a fabulous background to work with as a photographer.
Absolutely. Let's look at scene 6. This is also Aaron. This is the gentlemen who are dancing on the rooftops. Let's see if we can take a look at that one. Boy, is that an affecting shot. Look at that. The one on the left here, the Big 9 Social Aid and Pleasure Club, again, 2011, and 2 gentlemen who are dancing on top of a roof. And of course, this appears to be a structure that was damaged during Katrina. We see the telltale signs on the brick and all, but there's just absolute ecstasy in that shot.
Well, in the second lines, that kind of joy and dancing happens with children and adults all over the city. So it's a common thing to see, but it's very exciting, and it makes all the paraders very upbeat to have that kind of excitement.
It's true. And what's so interesting about the image is that it is very specific. Let's make sure we go back to it. This is image number 6 of the gentlemen who are dancing on top of the roof. What's so fascinating about that shot is that it's very New Orleans. You can't get more New Orleans than that, right? Because of the building, because of the crowd, because of the actual the feathers that the gentleman is holding up. But there's a timelessness about it, because you could see Gene Kelly doing that. You could see Gene Kelly on that roof. You could see Fred Astaire on that roof. Doing a dance that that sort of enraptures everyone. That's part of what makes the image so timeless. And for this viewer, but in your mind, what makes an image, help us see what you see. What makes an image timeless to you?
Um, well, I think it is really a combination of things, but in my editing, I try to, it's like has to do with the background, what you see, that you can see in the foreground, the people are marching. You see the Katrina X on the building, and then just the joy of the people in the background that are dancing on the ceiling. I mean, I think everyone has its own issues as far as composition and content, but I think it's the combination of what is there, the subject, and the overall look of the photograph.
Now, these images that we just saw, many of them were taken early on in your residency in New Orleans, let's say. So 2011, 2009, some of the images, you know, do you, no, here in, let's see, 2021, do you approach your work any differently now that you've had the experience of being at so many second lines, attending so many over the last 10, 12 years?
Definitely, Gwen. I've gotten to know many of the people involved in the second line community. And one of the things, they have the rope men who they keep the photographers, or I call the photographers of the third line, out of the ropes. And so, and some of the times I've gotten to know people and they've actually pulled me into the ropes to photograph. They want to have their photograph taken. So I think it's just learning I guess I've been learning the ropes, and I've been doing it now long enough where some people know me, but there's many great New Orleans photographers who photograph second lines, and I'm just among one of many, but I'm honored to be looked at, have my work considered.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Now, this next batch of images that we're going to see involve a number of crowd scenes and all. And so, what I mean, help us understand what I mean, how to look at an image of a crowd. What, there's so much going on. There's so many figures involved. What I mean, help us train our eyes to look at these images.
Well, one of the things I have been interested in is showing the different perspective of the second lines, whereas I'll climb on the back of a pickup truck to shoot down to show more of an overview than just focusing on a single portrait. And then, but I also do portraits, but it's like I like to have a variety of viewpoints so that you can see more of what's going on.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And but it's it's here we go. Look at this, the ladybug jumpers. In a shot like that, the ladybug jumpers, the one on the left, there's everything. You see I guess what we're looking at is the first line and the second line, right? The members of the ladybug jumpers and the band, and of course
Right.
the
Yeah,
the second line dancers and spectators. Is that right?
that's right. And on the right, Naomi Gibson, who is now departed, but was a longtime president of the Lady Buck Jumpers and a very respected person in the New Orleans second line community.
Mm. Well, another wonderful thing as we're continuing to look through these images is how often you capture so many different generations all at the same time. So, for instance, children and are so compelling in your images. I mean, they're always compelling, really, in a photograph. But I'm thinking about the slide of this little boy here with his cigar, and of course, and then right there on the right, he's also the kind of a focus of the picture when he's around so many different people of different generations, you know?
Yeah, that is, I believe it is Monk Boudreaux's great grandson on the left, and the
Great
young
Mardi Gras
men,
Indian chief.
yeah,
Mhm.
the young men Olympian are the oldest parading group in New Orleans with over 5 divisions, and they were founded in 1884. So this tradition goes back over 100 years in New Orleans of the benevolent associations that tried to help people get insurance and just survive in a very difficult economy.
Absolutely. Let's continue. Let's look at some more here. Okay.
And the next one is Uncle Lionel Baptiste Sr.'s jazz funeral, who was very beloved musician, jazz musician. And that one of the, focused on second lines mostly, but also jazz funerals, which are tied into the second lines and the social aid and pleasure clubs. But I really, the funeral was very moving, and there were just thousands of people there for his funeral. It was really very moving occasion.
It was one of the great funerals, actually. And Uncle Lionel was such a, as you say, such a beloved musician and culture bearer in New Orleans. And he, of course, went out as spectacularly as he lived. The crowds are so intense, and this really brings home the idea of the Social Aid and Pleasure Club as not just being, an entity in which one struts in the street, but it brings out the purpose of the Social Aid and Pleasure Club, which is to help gird the life of the individual in New Orleans, from birth until death, all the way through death, to offer the means and the ceremony necessary to witness a full life. And so when when you are looking, well, look at this, the Untouchables. Look at that. That's incredible. Along with, of course, the band. Is that the Hot Eight or the?
I believe that is a Hot Eight. And
yeah, along with the Hot Eight. Yeah, that's incredible. The work that, as you said, that has gone into this, into these suits is amazing.
The women of class, the one,
Mm-hmm.
they have Venetian glass actually in the costume, the mask that is being held on the right, and the image on the right is actually from Venice, Italy. So the clubs go to no expense, or to the greatest expense, to have the most unique and colorful costumes and decorations.
Mm, mm. Oh boy. Now, New Orleanians, we tend to present well in media. And that may be in part because so many New Orleanians participate in public spectacles, like Carnival or Second Lines, like Second Line Social Aid and Pleasure Club, Second Line parades, jazz funerals. We have all of these public traditions that date back, of course, to the 17th and early 18th centuries. People are accustomed to having a private face and a public face. So when does that comfort with being observed, being part of the spectacle, how does that make your job easier as someone who is depicting this? And how does it make your job more difficult in finding something else in the image?
Well, I think that overall, there are so many people out there with cameras and videographers trying to capture the second line parades and these cultural events, that I'm I'm one in a crowd trying to capture it, and I think that the groups are very accepting of allowing people to participate, and there are some exceptions, but I think just to try to present the group in the best possible light and to be respectful of the culture. I mean, I think that's the most important thing to me. I mean, their ethics to photojournalism and to try to follow those ethical guidelines to,
Like what?
well, the I have tried to, give social aid and pleasure clubs copies of my photographs, and I try to give out my business card to them, and I have given prints to many of the clubs, and also given them ones they could use on their website. And if I ever sell a photograph, I give a percentage to the Social Aid and Pleasure Club.
Mm. And so let me ask you this, only you really know what you're looking for when you are looking through your camera. Is that a Nikon that you use, or
I have used a Nikon and Leica in the past. Right now I'm using a Sony camera and a Fujifilm camera.
okay. And so only you know when you're looking through looking through the lens. And so do you find that sometimes the pageantry obscures something that you're looking for?
Well, I mean, sometimes I, will focus on a single subject, a portrait, and then sometimes I go for a middle scene that shows and then sometimes I I climb a church steps and shoot down, looking down at the whole overall scene. So it kind of depends on what's happening. But in a way, I feel like, I mean, I follow the parade, so I kind of get in the spirit of the parade, and I even do a little dancing when when I'm photographing, which gets me in the mood. So
I see.
people have laughed at my dance moves, but I'm trying. I don't have the fancy footwork of the people in the clubs, but at least I'm trying.
Yeah, you're going to have to learn to buck jump. That's really the bottom line. You're going to have to learn how to become a really good buck jumper. But let me ask you this: you mentioned earlier the role of editing that takes place in your work. It's not just snapping images; it's actually framing the image in the editing process. And so, talk a little bit about your eye, in terms of editing, and what makes an image true to you, what makes an image false, what is a false image?
Well, the coronavirus pandemic has been great for photographers who want to spend a lot of time editing, because with not being able to go out and photograph every week for a second line parade, I have spent an enormous amount of time editing my photographs, and I tried to re-look at all the second line photographs, which are tens of thousands, and look at it with a fresh eye. And but it seems like that, as a photographer, you do realize when there's something special about a shot, and that where everything works, where the way the subject looks, the costume, the light, just the whole thing works together. And there have been shots that I felt like were some of my best, and it seems like I haven't found that many more gems that I missed in my editing and looking over, but there's a couple that I have found. But recently I tried to revise my website. I first had a website in 2012 when I was still working as a museum director. And since 2015, I've been solely working on a second career as a photographer. So I finally redid during this pandemic in December, I redid my website. And so I had to edit everything down to a new selection, which made me do a lot of editing.
Right, but in terms of the, you know, what I mean, of what we're looking for in the picture, you know, sometimes, I mean, you know, as a photographer or as an editor, or anybody who depicts, you know, a scene, you know, there's something, there's a, I mean, you're training someone's eye to look at what you're looking at and all. And so, you know, I mean, you have a great deal of power here as an editor. And so what makes an image true to you? What makes an image false? Is truth just beauty? And not to say just beauty, but are you equating truth with beauty, or is there something more to it, or, you know, than that?
I'm thinking of Andre Cartier-Bresson and his decisive moment as some of the photography that I was brought up to admire and think was very excellent, or Lee Friedlander or Michael Smith, who the LEH award is named at. But I think there's something magical about when everything seems to kind of come together and gel, and the visual element makes it powerful for whatever reason. It's interesting because in my first career as a photographer, I have an MFA in photography, and most of the photography I did for the first part of my career was all silver gelatin prints, black and white, sometimes 4x5 camera, sometimes 35 millimeter. But since moving to New Orleans, I had an artist residency in Venice, Italy, right before I moved here. And I started using my wife's digital camera, and I had never used a digital camera before. And it was a color camera. And I spent a month wandering around Venice, photographing kind of the street scenes that you see there. And I kind of got hooked on I moved up to a higher quality digital camera and then to color. So everything I've been doing in New Orleans now has been in color, and the vibrancy of New Orleans and the second lines, it really works well with color for the composition and the effect.
Absolutely. So you're not adding color. You're bringing out. You're capturing the color. Is that what you're saying? You're not. You know, you may be adding color to your repertoire, but you're not adding color to images that you. This is what you're seeing. This is exactly what you're seeing on the street.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I see. And so, you know, just as you said earlier, you really are, you know what I mean, you've joined a pretty big club of photographers who have devoted much of their careers to depicting street scenes in New Orleans, particularly the Second Lines, the Mardi Gras Indians, and other processions. We're talking about Michael P. Smith, as of course you mentioned, Eric Waters, Julie Kahn, Cindy Bird, Ralston Crawford. You know, why get involved in this line of work when so many others have done it so well ahead of you, and many of them are from here? You know, what does, you know, I mean, why did you commit to, you know, I mean, to this kind of photography?
Well, I think that the second lines are an ever evolving kind of situation. And you know what, I mean, there's some amazing, all the photographers you name I really admire, and I was very pleased to recently be showing with Eric Waters in a exhibition at the Second Story Gallery, and Chandra McCormick and Keith Calhoun, and there's so many great photographers in New Orleans. But I think it's a continuing tradition, the second lines, where you have the old and new style fellows who came out with cameras where they had a decoration of their cameras as part of their second line outfit. And they're actually kind of making fun of the photographers in a way by having that as part of their decoration of their parade. But there's always something exciting and new costumes. So it's an ever evolving thing. There's new clubs. In my later work, I've photographed some of the brand new clubs that it's the first time they processed. So things are always going to be evolving and changing. And maybe I'm the next generation of photographers who've helped capture the second line clubs.
Maybe so. And you mentioned that so many people whom you photograph want to be photographed. I mean, they're not out there to be shy, obviously. But where is the line in your mind between celebration and appropriation? Where, you mentioned that you share some of the proceeds from the sales that you make of your images, that you share your business card and your contact information with the social aid and pleasure clubs. But but this is a very long-standing issue in New Orleans, in particular. Of between culture bearers and those who depict them. What's your belief? What do you believe, Charles Lovell?
I know I had a conversation with Sharice Harrison Nelson, who's a masking Indian, and she said, if you sell a photograph, you should give 30% to the masking Indians. And I have never sold a photograph, unfortunately, of a masking Indian, but I pledged to her, and I am true to my word that, if I do sell a photograph, I would donate the money. I have given money to YMO Junior, Cross the Canal Steppers, and several other groups. And I've, made copies of photographs for Prince of Wales and many other groups. So I just want to respect the culture, and I realize that that I can be looked at as an outsider, but I don't. I feel like I have a point of view, and I'm trying to represent the culture as best possible and as positive as possible. And I think that you can see that in my photographs.
A lot of this very same conversation is held often among musicians as well, who are often photographed or drawn or painted, and who rarely share in the profits of these, of this work. And I recently did a series of interviews with musicians who had been painted or drawn by an artist called Emily Reese. I don't know if you are familiar with her, but she has an exhibit at the Jazz Museum right now on artists. She's been at it for about the same amount of time that you've been at it, actually, here in New Orleans. And she's one of the very few who will share in the profits of her work. So it's obviously a situation that has to, that's ongoing, and where there should be more people like you all who are cognizant and willing and to share, and who actually do share, but going back to, we're gonna take some questions now, and we're going to watch the last batch of your images. But going back to Edgar Allan Poe, in that fateful statement of not believing anything of what you hear and only half of what you see. And I'm pressing you, of course, on an ideological or philosophical point, but how can you spot truth in a photo? Is it possible to spot truth in a photo?
I would say that that's a real hard question because I think photographs can lie, but I mean, I think it maybe has to do with, I mean, like every picture is open to interpretation, and the, you know, art is unto the beholder. But I think that I mean, I think that photographs can be deceiving in that you can have something that may look like something that could actually be something else. But I guess I think the fact that now I have my photography is in museum collections and has been shown in a lot of exhibitions, that I'm trying to be one of the good guys and to show a positive image of things, but things are open to interpretation.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Charles Lovell. Now we're going to take some questions while we watch the last batch of your images the that we have. And of course, if you listeners and viewers are curious, please go to Charles Lovell's website or to the LEH website, and you'll be able to see a lot more. But in the meantime, I want to give our listeners a chance to ask questions. And for some reason, I can only see half. Maybe my screen is too small. Let me see. Here we go. Here we go. Now, the first question is, let's see. Let's see. I find myself asking if there needs to be a strict division between journalistic and artistic photography. Can they really be separated?
I would say that I mean that both are distinctive, but I think they cross over, they cross lines, in my opinion, that you would have artistic photograph that cross the lines of journalism and vice versa.
Mm. So you mentioned like Bresson, for instance, the was he Roma?
Bresson.
Yeah, was he Roma or was he? I'm trying to remember, but the photographer whose images of France in particular, but your images in Europe are so compelling. But they're beautiful, they're evocative, but maybe they're not journalism. They're maybe more art than journalism. Let me ask you this. Here's one from George Krause. What is you already mentioned your go-to camera, but he's asking, what is your go-to lens? And do you shoot with multiple cameras during an event rather than trying to switch lenses on the fly?
I have currently I'm using a 28 millimeter Fuji film lens for most of my work. But then I also have a Canon that has a lens that goes from 90 millimeter to 20 millimeter, and a Sony that goes from 50 to 20 millimeter that I carry. You'll see me with a very old red backpack and a pith helmet. So my friend Judy Cooper, that I often ride with to parades, can find me on the second line.
Well, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. Let's see. Do you have a personal favorite display or event you've photographed?
I mean, there have been so many. If you go back to the Zulu photograph before the one that you showed before, I think like two back.
Zulu, from 2007.
I was kind of taken by the juxtaposition of Zulu with the Robert E. Lee sculpture. Just the irony of that just kind of worked on me. And I did photograph when they took down the Robert E. Lee. I also took took a photograph of that when that was being taken down. I was very supportive of the Take 'em Down NOLA folks.
Mm. Well, we have another question here, which is from an anonymous attendee who's asking how the names of the groups are chosen. For example, what are the origins of the names of Valley of Silent Men, Furious Five, and all? And so, when you talk to members of the social aid and pleasure clubs, do they tell their origin stories to you?
I have not. I have got to know some of the club members, but I'm really I'm intrigued by the Valley of Silent Men. The name is so beautiful, but I don't know why. I don't know why they chose that name, or I don't know the origin of it. I know my friend Judy Cooper is working on an exhibition with the Historic New Orleans collection that's going to open in February called Dancing in the Streets. And Eric Waters has also published a beautiful book about the second lines. But I would encourage your reader to look at those. There's going to be an exhibition book with Judy's exhibition, and they might have some of the origin stories in those.
Yes, I mean, they're wonderful. My Brother's Keeper, I love that one. They're, Men of Unity, Devastation, and Diamonds. That was amazing, huh?
There's some exciting clubs out there, and they're, like I say, it's ever evolving. So there are new clubs coming along that are just being formed.
Yes, but customarily these clubs were often not necessarily closed to the public, but they certainly had their own, and I think they still do have their own individual rules about membership. Is that correct?
I believe I have not I have not been able to afford to join a club yet, but hopefully someday I'll be more successful as a photographer and I'll be able to become a member. But I was honored when I was invited to a party the night before the parade for the money wasters at the Charbonnet Funeral Home. And I figured at that time, I had arrived on the Second Life Club by just being invited to that party, and it was very fun. And then the next day I went out and really photographed my tail off and got some really great photographs. So getting to know like Linda Green, the Yakima lady who's shown on the left in that photograph from 2019, and Will Cockerman, who started the club, the Bad Boys. And I've given both of them copies of the photographs of those parades.
Oh boy, this is wonderful. And then I think we might be getting close to our end point, unfortunately. But I wanted to squeeze in this question, or at least one more, if not two more questions. One from Michael Tisserand, the terrific writer and wonderful depictor of culture in New Orleans. He says, thanks for the wonderful nuanced discussion. I'm wondering if you have had the chance to photograph how culture bearers are living and coping during the pandemic. And if so, how are those images different from ones from previous years? Have you had a chance over these last 10 months or so?
I have not. And I moved in March from uptown New Orleans, where I lived for 10 years, to the West Bank. And so I have not been in, I've been over here in Algiers and wandering around the levee photographing the streets. So that's what I have done during the pandemic, and then editing a lot of my past photographs from the second lines. But I would be interested in doing something like that, but I have not been able to do that as of yet.
Okay, and lastly from Jesse Marshall, and this is, does Charles Lovell offer any mentorships for beginner photographers such as myself on how to get started with photography, such as this?
Um, my I went and gave a lecture to a fourth grade elementary school for the Photo Alliance a couple of years ago, and unfortunately, with the pandemic and trying to, I mean, I actually have never made a profit as a photographer in my 5 years of being a photographer, but I'm reluctant to take on such a project at this time until I can actually survive.
Well, that's let's hope that we'll all survive and we'll survive to see each other in person and to celebrate your beautiful photography in person, perhaps at the LEH one day or the HNOC or any other institution that is promoting your work, Charles Lovell. I would love to thank you, to thank Aaron Greenwald and the LEH for hosting this discussion. Also, I would like to congratulate you yet again for receiving the LEH Michael P. Smith Memorial Documentary Photographer Award for 2020. And, you know, keep snapping in 2021.
Thank you so much, Gwen. It's been a real pleasure. And thank you again to the Louisiana Endowment for the Humanities.
Everybody for joining us today. We hope you'll tune in later this year when we honor our 2021 Humanities Awardees. Thanks, Gwen. Thanks, Charles.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.